For example, Lahore is the worst affected in terms of air quality.
Well, Pakistani environmental law has had a great champion in our superior judiciary. We found that the Environment Protection Agency had recalibrated the AQI parameters for Pakistan. It was the largest penalty ever awarded to a contravener of environment laws to date in Pakistan. It is really the job of the Environment Protection Agency to be doing this, not the court.
Welcome to Front Seat to Climate Change. Today we are going to talk to Advocate Rafay Alam, who is a leading environmental lawyer and also the founding partner of CCRC Consultants. And we're going to ask him his thoughts about Pakistan's journey from a nation badly affected by climate change and knowingly not doing enough about it, but also gradually getting onto the road to building climate resilience and informing the public about issues that we face today. Welcome, Rafay. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me, Dawar.
We hear about your work in the news, a lot of it on Twitter as well. And environmental law is something that people still find mysterious, especially in Pakistan. In other places, you can read about it, case files, and all of that. But give me an example that we know that, for example, Lahore is the worst affected in terms of air quality. And we know about it because of data, but also because a lot of stuff has happened in courts. And those things that happen in courts don't necessarily get reported as effectively. And people want to know that why do we have certain policies the way we do, who was behind them, what was said. So give me maybe some thoughts about the smog case.
Well, Pakistani environmental law has had a great champion in our superior judiciary. So, going back to the mid 1990s, where Justice Salim Akhtar recognized that the right to a clean and healthy environment was part of the fundamental right to life and made environmental law basically a constitutional right from that point onwards. Then we have environmental legislation from the late 1990s, and then after the 18th Amendment, each province has its own Environment Act, which essentially prohibits any pollution beyond quality standards, and their quality standards for ambient air, for gas emissions, for water emissions, for drinking water, for automobile gas and exhausts and things like that. And any emissions above that can be prosecuted in front of an environment tribunal. Of course, the Environment Protection Agency also has the power to issue what are known as environment protection orders, directing people or polluters or people who contravene the law to take action to reduce pollution, to clean up their mess, to install pollution control devices and measures such as that. And then there are miscellaneous things in our environmental protection laws that prohibit the import of hazardous wastes, regulate hazardous substances, and even provide for the regulation of motor vehicles. And
What about the tribunals? I believe that's the where initial complaint can be made or is heard. So is it something that the judiciary is taking seriously that we build the capacity of those tribunals so it doesn't go up that high?
No, I don't think any of the, other than Punjab, which we have environmental tribunals in all the four provinces, and they're supposed to have three members, the chairman and two other members, a technical member and a general member. And it wasn't until this year that Punjab had a full three-member tribunal. And I'm not sure whether the tribunals in the other provinces are functioning properly or not. And tribunals are places where cases go to die, because quite often cases that go before the tribunal are where, in the scheme of things, there's so many tens of thousands of industrial units, for example, in Lahore or in Karachi, and so few environmental inspectors that unka kaam jo hai is basically off of monthlies. And the major cases that come to the tribunal is when ya to kya kehte hain, सेठ का बेटा आकर take over करता है, वो monthly adjust करता है to the displeasure of the inspector, so the inspector takes you to court. But again, because the inspector doesn't have the equipment necessary to carry out a test and a sampling that will result in an effective prosecution, most of those cases just are, they're tossed out after. वो ख्वारी थोड़ी बहुत होती है, for about a year or so, you're pulled back and forth, clients are pulled back and forth, but they have been largely ineffective.
And that's why the upper courts are where
Upper courts
the
jump
action
in.
happens.
Actually, just a few months ago, the Islamabad tribunal issued a judgment in a case involving Bahria town. It was the largest penalty ever awarded to a contravener of environment laws to date in Pakistan. And this was when, for Bahria, Islamabad, permission was granted for 800 canals of land, and construction was done on 12,000 acres of land. And the penalty was 3 million rupees, which I believe is less than the price of a plot over there.
I think according to law, I think that's also the upper limit that we've set whenever the law was made.
The law, by the way, allows for the tribe. There's a fixed penalty of like 5 million or 1 million, and then an incremental per day penalty. But the tribunal can also take into consideration any profit that has been made by the contravenor in the duration of the contravention as well. And in the case of Bahria Town, Islamabad, the Islamabad tribunal did not take that profit into account. So it was a very bare minimum. And 3 million is not much for an entity the size of those developers. And so that's why the superior courts, the high courts, the Supreme Courts often jump in and act in support. In 2017, because of the increased air pollution in Lahore, I had the opportunity to take a case to court because we found that the Environment Protection Agency had recalibrated the AQI parameters for Pakistan. Air quality index is a way of looking at different types of pollutants, and the result is given to you in a single figure number, right? Rather than looking at, PM 2.5 or sulfur differently, you're just looking at a single number. So it makes understanding things easier. However, AQI is not the formal legal mandate of our Pakistani laws. We have separate air quality standards that have to be followed. But nevertheless, the Environment Protection Agency had fiddled with the AQI parameters to underreport the severity of air pollution. And so we'd taken that case to court. However, a variety of reasons, there was a pandemic that came up. I wound up withdrawing that case from court and pursuing the recalibration in the Punjab Environment Protection Council, which is a statutory body made by law to look into making policy and implementing policy, environmental policy in Punjab. And we had some success over there because WWF Pakistan, a former professor of Lahore College for Women University, who was the dean of the Environment Sciences Department, and some other people sat down and spoke to the EPA about recalibrating the AQI settings, which I understand have been done. It's still not, in my opinion, 100% perfect, but it's much better than what it was in 2017.
So this discussion about AQI usually comes about because China, for example, made their own standards when the US AQI existed, and every country since then has said that we
can make our own.
Yeah, we can make something which is more suited to our monitoring systems and what our people can survive. And that is the logic I think these guys also gave, that Pakistanis for some reason might be able to withstand more pollution than any other person.
Yeah, I heard that argument in one of the Environment Protection Council meetings, and I had to shout down the member from the Environment Protection Agency who said that. And I said, you can't adjust your air quality standards to what industry minimums are or what background radiation levels are or background emission levels are. You have to set them based on the health impacts of air pollution. Most importantly, you can't say, nahi ji, because Pakistan mein pollution bahut pehle se hai, aur ya hamare log jo hai wo garam मिर्चें खाते हैं तो उसकी वजह से वो एयर पोल्यूशन ज़्यादा बर्दाश्त कर सकते हैं. No, that's all nonsense. You have to have an objective analysis based on health and the impacts of health.
देखिए ना, जो the figure that we get estimate कि 2 लाख पाकिस्तानी हर साल जान खो बैठता है क्योंकि pollution ज़्यादा है. Pollution से you have different impacts, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes even. तो like given all of that, do you think that comes into the consideration of the courts, that are they just looking at, yeah, visibly there's too much smog, or are they also looking at the aspect that we usually lose much more people in a year than we have lost during the war on terror, for example?
Yeah. No, these considerations have not passed through the court. Now, while I appreciate the work and the support the superior judiciary has given environmental law and air quality issues in the past, I also point out that this is not that all the judges of the Lahore High Court are equally sensitive to environmental issues. There's just a handful of them, and similar in the Supreme Court. As a matter of fact, if you go back in the last 10 years, there are just 5 or 6 or 7 judges in all of Pakistan who've taken an interest in environmental cases and have been sort of the outliers in recognizing and protecting environmental rights. And so currently in the Lahore High Court, there are just a handful of judges, 2 or 3, who are looking at environment cases. And there is one court in particular that is hearing a number of petitions relating to the environment. Now, whilst it is a sign of their support of environmental issues, at the same time, and this is counterintuitive, It is really the job of the Environment Protection Agency to be doing this, not the court. Adalat ka kaam hai to give judicial decisions, not to clean the air. But by becoming so proactive, they wind up dampening the capacity of the Environment Protection Agency and of the department to do their proper job. And so I quite often say that, environmental regulation in Punjab right now isn't being done by the government of Punjab or the EPA. It's being done out of courtroom number 3 in the Lahore High Court, which is not how it should be in an ideal world.
One thing that I appreciate your profession and other environmental lawyers that are coming up. I've dealt with a few of them. I've worked with a few of them. The issues of environment and climate in Pakistan, not climate per se, but environment in general, usually become a little complicated because there's a political angle to it or a big, commercial angle to it. Because the environment in itself is an issue of land use change, of what sort of money you can mint out of the land. And land is the biggest business in Pakistan. Unfortunately, it is the biggest business in Pakistan and other developing countries as well. And whenever you talk about land, especially like a big chunk of land, someone big is behind it and you want to be a little careful. Do you think that people who want to come into this profession are willing to take the risks, or would they just want to go ahead with a regular law career?
You can have a perfectly regular law career before the Environment Tribunal. But like any other thing in Pakistan, if you want to stick your head up, you wind up, attracting some of the big sharks or the big fish. And you're absolutely right that at a higher level in Pakistan, environmentalism is all about resource extraction. It's a big resource game. And it's not just property. It's also things like natural resources like minerals, sand, copper, and now things like agriculture. These are all resource games being played out in wherever those resources are available by the players who have the ability to access those resources. Not just that, but also petroleum, the flow of petroleum.
And also, even the big judgments that we really appreciate, there's a certain big sharks, you cannot implement the decision against them. And the one thing that comes to my mind is the Margla Hills case. Like, you have the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court saying that, and I think the judgment was in a way sets the precedent on how master planning needs to be done, because it says that climate change is coming and a CDA needs to talk about the climate effects in Islamabad when they're making master plan and all of that. But the penalties that it wanted to impose, it can't be done.
What about the cement plants in the sort of Son Valley and stuff? वो तो 20 साल से चलते आ रहे हैं, उनके खिलाफ केस, but penalties भी impose हुई थी. ₹1 a liter they were charged, never paid, and stuff. Yeah. So environmental lawyers have to be more intelligent in the types of results they think they can get and the types of results they can get. I mean, you might not win a case in the traditional way, but you might be able to squeeze some sort of advantage out.
So, litigation की तो हमने काफी बात किया, but I want to, especially we've talked about the Pakistani law enough, I want to talk about the dynamics that we face internationally. Now, we're one of those countries which are impacted by it, so we keep on saying that we are the poster child of what climate disasters can look like. But at the same time, there is the legitimate criticism that we don't do enough for environment protection and climate policy locally. We have a bunch of documents. A lot of them have come about in the last 3 years, and a lot of those documents aren't really what they should be. They're a bunch of wish lists. But in the international domain, there is a certain appreciation what Pakistan tries to do. We might not have the power to really get it done, but we did try to, talk about loss and damage in the last COP. I believe you were part of that delegation as well. So, what were your thoughts about the really top negotiations or negotiators on our side, and what was the impression of the response that we got?
Okay, well, you're going to have to give me a minute here, because the loss and damage resolution in the last COP, in COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh, was a pathbreaker. It was a recognition that countries suffering from the disasters of climate change will be offered a financial facility beyond the other facilities like Global Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund that will help their people and their economies get back on their feet. It's a recognition that there was something wrong, for sure, and it's a major achievement. Pakistan succeeded last year, or punched above its weight, because not only did it suffer the devastation of the floods last year, which sort of made it the poster child for loss and damage. I mean, there was a 100-kilometer lake that emerged between Sindh and Balochistan over the course of a couple of weeks, something you can't really adapt to, something that you need a loss and damage facility for. I mean, just I think a few days ago, the World Bank published a report saying that Pakistan is number one in international development aid, and Pakistan's own loan portfolio has doubled. Its debt portfolio has doubled in the last year on account of the fact that the global sort of financial system hasn't been giving grants to countries like Pakistan suffering climate change, but have been giving them loans instead. So Pakistan was a poster child for loss and damage, and the argument for to have a loss and damage facility. And it benefited from the fact that in December of 2021, Pakistan was made chairman of the G77 block of countries, G77 plus China block of countries that negotiate at the United Nations. And it was Ambassador Munir Akram who early in the year in 2022, before the floods, was instrumental in bringing loss and damage onto the agenda for COP27. And then the floods happened. This time round, in a span of months between when the floods happened in July, September, and when COP happened in October, November, the government of Pakistan, showing great coordination between the Ministry of Climate Change, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Prime Minister's office, managed to change the narrative that they were taking to COP, leverage their position at G77, and ensure that the loss and damage facility was decided at COP. I mean, that took negotiating with small island states and vulnerable countries and really pushing the G77 to support the stance that was taken. And all of that is great. But when you take two steps back, the purpose and functions of the UNFCCC, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, under which the Conference of Parties, or COP, meets, the objective of the UNFCCC is to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions, to make sure temperatures stay under 1.5. And that can only be done by mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. And in last year's COP, there was no bold statement about phasing out or phasing down fossil fuels or greenhouse gas emissions. So I think in retrospect, we had, at the international level, a sense of, oh God, this COP might not have succeeded, but here's a small success that we can sort of point at and say, what a great thing happened.
I think in the last couple of minutes, I think 1 minute, we just wind it up, and I'll just throw some random words at you, and you can speak whatever comes to your mind. So number one, okay, climate change.
Doom and gloom.
Number two, Karakoram.
Melting.
And number three, I think we'll just stick to smog.
Buy air purifiers.
Buy air purifiers. Any recommendations on a brand?
No, I can't do that. I have too many friends who are in the businesses.
Yeah. Okay, I think that was great.
Thank you very much.
Very nice speaking to you again.
Thank you very much.
And I at least hope the doom and gloom isn't really something that we get afraid of, and make it something like channel the anger in a way that we can really get something done.
Even now, the scientists tell us that we know that we can meet 1.5. It can be done. It's just that the habits that we've inculcated, the things that we're used to, the wasteful ways we have of our recreation, where we burn fossil fuels for fun, these things have to change. We live in a society that's tied by fossil fuels. It's supported by fossil fuels. We have to reorganize our society at a very fundamental level. This can be done. The science is there. We just have to change the way we behave and a lot of our belief systems and our moral systems.
All right, folks. Thank you for joining us. We will continue on with these discussions with more guests, and very thankful for your time. And keep on writing in your feedback, any comments that you have, anyone that you like to see on this podcast. And remember to hit us up and follow our page. Thank you.